Hi y'all, it's Amanda from Fig and Thistle Books. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss my best book I read in 2017. I almost didn't post this video. I have thought about it for ages. 2017 was kind of a crappy reading year for me. I only read 24 books, which is half of what I normally read. And I like to do book lists. So at the end of the year, I would normally be like my top 3 or my top 5 or my top in different categories or genres. I didn't have enough material. What I read last year was good. I don't think I read a bum book all year. However, I didn't have the material I have to do end of the year book list like I typically do. So I thought, what is the one book that I read in 2017 that really just impacted me most? When I say best book, I don't necessarily mean, oh, I'm going to reread it again and again, or I read it really fast, or it was, happy, or it's the book that impacted me the most, the one that I have carried with me the most through 2017 that I think about regularly, or if I'm like, what impacted me last year, this book is at the top of the list. So before I announce the book, I did want to do a quick disclaimer. This book that I'm about to talk about really hit me in the gut. It impacted me in an incredibly personal way. Reviewing this book in an objective way, or just talking about craft, or that's not this kind of book. This book impacted me in a way that I can't talk about its meaning to me without talking about my personal life, which I will try not to sit here and gab at you for too long. And the book that I'm scheduled to review next week is another book that has really packed an emotional wallop for me that I will discuss within the context of my own life. So my reviews typically are not like that. So I don't want you to look at, oh, Amanda's starting to do reviews. Oh, they're all about her. No, it just happens to be that this book and the book I'm reviewing next week really speak to me in a personal way. So having said that, my book for 2017, my favorite read, was Renee Denfield's The Enchanted. It was written in 2014. It's a slim book, I think less than 200 pages, and it was published by HarperCollins. I don't have it with me because it's a book that I liked so much, I proceeded to lend it to everyone. So I get it back and then I give it to someone else to read. So it is making the rounds as you speak. I don't even know who has it right now. Who knows? Okay, so a really quick synopsis, and I'm going to bring up my blog from where I wrote my blog. Don't bother visiting it. I haven't written anything new in a while, but I reviewed this very briefly in February when I read it, and so that was a bit of a stretch. It's almost a year ago. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the plot synopsis that I wrote about here because I made sure not to be spoilery, and I don't want to be spoilery right now. Okay, so the plot concerns an unnamed lady who is a death row investigator. It also has a priest with a bit of a shady past, and it concerns a prison and the prisoners within that prison. The narrator of the book is one of the convicts. He is in the lower part of the prison called the dungeon, and I believe he is unnamed. In fact, I think pretty much, if I'm remembering correctly, most of our characters are unnamed. Like the narrator, the prisoner who's narrating, refers to the death row investigator as the lady, and the priest is referred to as the priest, and the warden is the warden. So unless I'm just misremembering, there's not a lot of names in there. This narrator, who is a prisoner in the dungeon who is narrating for us, is he indicates that he has committed a horrific crime, and the people who are in the dungeon, as he calls it, have all committed heinous crimes. There's some, the language in this book is very beautiful. When you pick it up and you start reading it, it may seem like there are elements of magical realism. this isn't spoilery. It will become quite apparent just a few pages in that it's not really magical realism. It's that this prisoner who's narrating for us is mentally unwell, and so some of the visual and auditory experiences he has and the way he talks and views things is influenced by his mental stability. So basically there's a bit of mystery in this book. The lady who is the death row investigator is attempting to research the past of this one criminal to provide information to his attorney so they can commute his death sentence. This prisoner does not want his death sentence commuted, so he's not very forthcoming with information, and she has to work to kind of piece together his past. While doing this, she's also learning more about her past. She's thinking about her life and her experiences and how she's gotten where she is. The priest, she's learning more about him. There's a very kind warden who tries to do right by the prisoners. And there's also an incredibly, incredibly corrupt and horrible guard who causes some issues, and he is like the most vile thing ever. So that's a brief synopsis. Like I said, it's a very brief book. To talk about it more clearly or more in depth would just spoil it for you. So, okay, so let's talk. Let me turn over my notes here. So what I want to say about The Enchanted is, okay, when you read a book, anyone reads a book, it is often we read that book through the lens of our own experiences. So that's what I think is one of the most amazing and magical things about books. Every time we read it, that is such an individual experience. No person reads a book the same way. Even if we can agree on themes or things we liked or things we didn't like, we're picturing in our head characters and settings and that are different from the next person reading the book. It's such an imaginative and magical experience. And so we read books through filters. Who we are, where we come from, who are the people in our lives, what experiences have we had. We read books through a filter of ourselves. And I think even when you try to be incredibly objective and you peel away those layers, or you recognize, you know, I'm reading this through this lens, I should try to like peel that away and try. We're still acknowledging that there is something within this text that speaks to us in a very personal way, that we have imagined and envisioned and directed how this looks in our head through the lenses of our own lived experiences. So The Enchanted I read through two lenses, and I think this is what made the book so profound, so moving, and so impactful to my life. Okay, so the first lens I read this book through is I've talked about, I'm sorry this is rambling, but this is very difficult to talk about, but I feel like it should be talked about. So I have talked about, or I've alluded to in other videos, that the end of 2016 was bad for my family. And 2017, part of the reason why it was such a crap reading year was that we had a bad thing happen, and there were reverberations and consequences and things that we are still living with to this day. And the bad thing that happened, I'm not going to go in a lot of detail. It was a crime of violence. And it impacted my family in horrific and unimaginable ways. See, I told myself I'm going to cry or review a book. That's silly. Legally, we did what we could do, and there was not justice served. That is all I will say about that. However, when I picked up this book, I knew it was about a prison. I knew it was narrated through the eyes of a criminal. That's why I wanted to read it. One, it was slim, and I was like, I wanted to read it because I reached this point where I was so convinced that people are so bad. There's so much bad in the world that it is disheartening. There are people who are monsters. There are people who choose to do horrible, horrible things to other people. And why would they do that? And I needed to feel like there aren't monsters, that there are not people walking around who are bad and scary. Now, having said that, I know that there are some people who are just, they're so far gone, they're bad. There are scary people. I'm not going to say that I'm going to be like unsafe and like, I'm going to go frolic in the middle of the night in some scary place because people aren't monsters. I needed humanity to be restored to me. I needed to believe that people are redeemable, that people who do horrible things are still people, because I was angry and scared, and the things I thought about doing to this person who hurt my family, I will not mention because I would go to jail. And this hatred and anger and fear was like eating me up. Like I was just so mad. I was so like, this isn't fair. This isn't right. So I read this book. And in this book, I'm going to scroll down to my blog. You learn that there are these people who've committed crimes on various levels. Some crimes committed, there's a boy in there who's in there for Grand Theft Auto. And, you know, he made a jerk choice. But the things that happened to him in prison, he doesn't deserve that. He doesn't deserve what happens to him in this prison. There are people there who have done horrible things, made horrible decisions, and hurt people in horrific ways. And they're still human. They're still human. They still experience loss and regret and vulnerability and loneliness. They've had hurts in their lives. Some of them are come from backgrounds of like violence and loneliness, and that doesn't excuse the choices they make, because we learned that the lady who's the investigator, she's had a tough life and she has not chosen to hurt people, but that these are still humans. And there's one scene where one of the, not our narrator, but one of the other guys is about to be executed, and he's a jerk to people. He's a jerk to the other prisoners. He taunts people. And when he's about to go be executed, he is so scared and alone and vulnerable. And I was like, oh my God, these people are human. And I needed that. I needed to know that people can do horrific things to other people, and they're still humans. So I've like rehearsed this so much. I was like, you're gonna go in there and be really like objective and just talk about it without emotion. This is not that kind of book. So that is one lens, okay? That is one lens I read this book through, as someone whose family has been impacted from crime, and I hate the person who did this, but that person is human. I would like for him to go to jail forever, but I hope that this person here at my family, I hope that he changes his heart. And I don't mean that in religious sense. I mean that I hope he changes his heart. Okay, so second lens. God, this is hard. Second lens. The second lens I read this book through is being a criminal. Yes, I said that right. A criminal. So, when I was 17 years old, I was a high school dropout. I ran away from home, and I was addicted to methamphetamines. January 19th will mark 20 years methamphetamine free. Yay. So, but while I was on drugs, and I had an undiagnosed mental illness and not really access to quality mental health care, my parents tried their best to get me help, and it was just not happening in our rural community in the 90s. It just wasn't going to happen. So I was on a meth bender for, I think, 10 days, and my parents tried to stop me from leaving the house, and there was an altercation, and I went to jail. I was charged with possession of methamphetamine, assault, battery, and terroristic threats. I was in jail for 52 days. I had 4 years of felony probation. Luckily, I was able to use my first offender's rights. I can never own a gun, but that's cool because I don't like guns. I can never own a gun, but I am able to vote. I don't have to put anything on my applications. But, you know, I was a drug addict. I had an untreated mental illness. My family, we were lower middle class, so we weren't like dirt poor, but we were lower middle class, and we didn't have access to a lot of resources we needed to get me well. So there's that. I made terrible, hurtful decisions and hurt people I love who are incredibly close to me. I'm still human. I mean, look at me now. I'm in library school. I've had the same job for 13 years. I'm married. I have 3 wonderful kids. I'm human. I made really, really terrible choices. I acted in horrible ways. And I'm a human. So I'm reading this book, which I hope I've reviewed for you without just spilling a bunch of personal details. I'm reading this book that is so beautifully written. The characters, I think not having them named is particularly brilliant, because I'm not going, oh, that's Joe who did this and this and this and was born here and did that. We're able to see ourselves. I was able to see myself as both one of the criminals and as a victim of a crime. And that was an incredibly powerful experience. I would also say another thing that I'd have to say about Denfield's writing that I greatly appreciated is that the way she writes, you're able to know when horrific things happen. Crimes, rape, children being hurt. But there is not gratuitous violence. There's not long explanations. You get like a half sentence or a word or an implied action, and you know that something bad happened, but it's not exploitive, it's not gratuitous. And as one with my own trauma, I appreciate that. I don't want to read a book that's like feels the need to describe to me graphically sexual assault. I don't need that. So she writes in a way, and I feel like this was very intentional on her part, and I think that's why she kept her prose so beautiful and tight, and that kind of magical realism in the writing. Like, it's not actual magical realism, but the writing sounds almost like fairy tale or folkloric, is a way of like distancing the reader from the actual horrors of violent crimes. So I feel like that was effective. I felt like I was not plunged into the middle of like a violent act, and you know, it was a respectful and effective way of writing that kept the focus on the human elements, on the humanity of these people and these characters, without delving into the gross underbelly of all the other stuff, because that's really, it's not so much the crimes that happen, it's the humans who are impacted by these crimes or who perpetrate these crimes. And so I appreciated that in the writing very much. I feel like it was very effective, and I feel it was a conscious choice on her part to write in that manner. So basically, The Enchanted by Renee Denfield, it was an amazing book. It was a tough book to read, because of my own life experiences, and I hope I didn't just like scare you all off by like crying and like, boo, this book. But it really, I wrote in my review, one can make overwhelmingly bad or even evil choices and still experience regret, loss, vulnerability, and loneliness. Crimes are not excused in this novel, but there are real human hurts, and it makes it hard to see the world strictly divided into good people and bad people. They're just humans. So there's a quote that I put at the top of my review that really just like, so this quote says, "I would think for hours how strange it was that some parts of words are silent, just like some parts of our lives. Did the people who wrote the dictionaries decide to mirror language to our lives, or did it just happen that way? And that's just really, it talks about the silence when we look at a crime, when we look at a crime victim, when we look at an investigator. There are elements of lives that we don't know, that we aren't privy to. And we're all humans, and we just try to do the best we can, and we try to love each other. And that's what makes life worth living. So my 2017 best book is Renee Denfield's The Enchanted. Thank you for watching my emotional rambling review. I greatly appreciate it, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.